Bakhmut. Yes, the fighting in the area of Bakhmut has definitely returned primarily because the Russians realized that if they did not resume their counterattacks, the Ukrainians would be able to move freely north and east of the railroad line south of the city. Indeed, in this case, the AFRF would not have time to mine and build a line of fortifications along the route from Bakhmut through Opytne to Odradivka and further south. This may be urgently needed, given the activity of Ukrainian artillery in the area. In the last day alone, it reportedly hit about 20 Russian artillery pieces southeast of Bakhmut. Moreover, due to the low activity of the Russians, the 28th Mechanized has quietly destroyed the garrison of Kurdyumivka over the past few days. Unless the Russians launch a major counterattack in the area, the ruins of this town will likely be liberated in about a week. It can now be confirmed with certainty that the Ukrainian armed forces have broken through the first line of Russian defense east of the railway embankment near Andriivka and have made significant progress towards Odradivka. Fierce house-to-house fighting is taking place throughout Novoprokopivka, from a large complex of Russian fortifications to the northwest and north of the village. As far as we know, the advanced Ukrainian forces have already passed the center of the village. After a several-day break, the Russians returned to counterattacks on the flanks of the Ukrainian offensive. Tom Cooper, a military analyst, noted that the headquarters of the 58th Russian Airborne Division no longer even controls the battle. The soldiers are simply ordered to stay put and not retreat, no matter what happens around them. From time to time, reinforcements are sent there to keep certain positions manned by soldiers. But there is no longer any reliable communication between the army headquarters and the headquarters of the various units. The Russian troops are doing exactly what they are ordered to do, sitting in their bunkers and occasionally fighting until they are killed or, in very rare cases, captured. However, the airborne troops have better communications and thus can launch counterattacks. It is fairly safe to say that this has led to an increase in Russian losses in infantry fighting vehicles, but it has had an impact on the situation and continues to do so. The reason is that Tavria simply cannot ignore the threat of Russians clamping down on the flanks of the Ukrainian offensive, and therefore has to redirect a good portion of its artillery fire to such counterattacks. If they redirect their fire to Russian counterattacks, the amount of fire aimed at assaulting Russian positions to the south is reduced. For similar reasons, it appears that the Ukrainian armed forces sent the 71st Ranger Brigade east to help the 118th Mechanized Brigade quell the Russian offensive north/northwest of Verbov. The Ukrainians need this so that the 82nd Air Assault Brigade can continue to destroy the remnants of the 417th Reconnaissance Battalion, 247th Airborne Regiment and bars. To the southeast of Novoprokopivka, the 47th Mechanized continues to push along the 1st anti-tank trench, the 116th along the 2nd anti-tank trench. Both of them are moving southwest, and the 116th is about 50 to 100 meters away from the top of Height 166. That's why we see videos like this one, where Ukrainian drones are scouting Russian positions along and behind the Toblerone line, or the Dragon's Teeth. Obviously, the purpose of this reconnaissance is to advance toward the hilly terrain between Saladka Baka, Shenikn, and Novi. This advance has been so slow because of the almost constant attacks by Russian FPV drones, because the area is heavily mined, and because of regular counterattacks by the airborne forces, and because Ukrainian artillery is needed elsewhere. Soldiers of the Chervona-Kalina Brigade are advancing in the Zaporizhia sector. Shelling, broken roads, and mined territory do not stop Ukrainian soldiers. The footage shows that the occupants were fleeing their positions, leaving behind their belongings, field communication wires, and weapons. Meanwhile, the Russians are firing artillery and launching lancets, and damaging Ukrainian artillery over and over again. At the same time, it is clear from the available data that the shelling by the Ukrainian 44th and 148th Artillery Brigades is just as deadly, large-scale, and constant. They continue to hit the Russian rear hard and take out Russian artillery as well. For example, a few days ago, the 44th Artillery of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and a Ukrainian UV unit destroyed this to be self-propelled gun southeast of Verbov. The problem is that the longer the Ukrainian armed forces take to break through the defenses here, the more time the Russians will have to organize new minefields and build more field fortifications. However, the Russians are clearly short of weapons. Guerrillas in the temporarily occupied Crimea have noticed Russia's transfer of Soviet weapons. It may be delivered to Zaporizhzhia region. It is about the transfer of Soviet D-20 howitzers, which the Russians have taken out of conservation. It is noteworthy that the D-20 howitzer, 152 mm, in its D-22 modification, is used on the 2C3 Acacia self-propelled artillery systems, the destruction of which has become very frequent at the front.